So Roger Corman gives Peter Bogdanovich a call and says, "Hey, you want to direct a picture?" Of course, Bogdanovich says, "Yeah, I do." So then Corman tells him exactly how it's going to be. Corman says, "Boris Karloff owes me 2 days' work. Shoot 20 minutes in those 2 days with him, then get some other actors together for a week or two and get, say, another 40 minutes of film. And then take 20 minutes of Karloff footage from a picture I made called The Terror." So that's 20 minutes with Karloff, 40 minutes with a bunch of other actors, and then another 20 minutes of The Terror. So all in together, that's a new 80-minute Boris Karloff picture. This would end up being Targets from 1968. Before this, Peter Bogdanovich had never directed his own feature film. The two met by accident at a movie theater. Bogdanovich was mostly a writer for Esquire magazine and worked in theater, and Corman asked if he wanted to be his assistant while he made this movie called The Wild Angels, with Peter Fonda, Nancy Sinatra, Bruce Dern, and a crapload of Hell's Angels. It was like a slice of Easy Rider before Easy Rider existed. This, in essence, is the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking, a place where Francis Ford Coppola, Joe Dante, James Cameron, even Jack Nicholson have gone to. Bogdanovich was running around like a lunatic for Corman during The Wild Angels. Sometimes he was a gopher, cinematographer, writer, editor, second unit director, and even being an extra during a funeral for which the Hells Angels kind of beat the snot out of him, because, he represented the man. But back to Targets. Bogdanovich and his then-wife, Polly Platt, decided to juxtapose old-timey horror that Boris Karloff represented with current real-life horror. This horror was a replica of Charles Whitman, a mass-murdering ex-Marine who first killed his mother and wife and became known as the infamous Texas Tower Sniper. Targets is about an elderly actor, Byron Orlock, who has just seen his latest film and has decided to retire from acting. He does, however, decide to do one more personal appearance at the drive-in that's showing his movie, and this is where he'll encounter the mass murderer. This is a stark film. The way Bogdanovich shows the murders are brutal. He doesn't look away from the violence. He shows us through the murderer's point of view and through his scope even. He shows us in broad daylight, out in the open, and when the drive-in scene at night comes again, he's not bathing anything in too much darkness. He wants you to see the reality of it. He wants you to feel every emotion from the victims while barely giving us any motive of the killer. The killer that Quentin Tarantino so eloquently described as a, quote, young, good-looking, crew-cut, sporting, Baby Ruth-eating baby boomer who grew up in a house recognizable to most white viewers as their own, who watched Joey Bishop on TV with his family and listened to 93 KHJ on the car radio of his Mustang convertible. End quote. Besides its political views and its hard look into gun control, Bogdanovich can't help but show his absolute love for the cinema. With its behind-the-scenes process of filmmaking, from production to test screenings to the projectionist in the projection booth, he shows us the transition of cinema at the time from watching films in giant theaters of the yesteryear versus seeing films at the drive-in inside your car where no one can hear you scream. But how was Roger Corman able to get such a brilliant directorial debut out of Bogdanovich? Well, Corman set him up in a way few other first-time directors had been set up. After all, the creation of the film feels like a gimmick, a movie piecemealed together to make an 80-minute Karloff picture. But those were crucial pieces to help make the film what it became. Honestly, though, Peter Bogdanovich had a lot of help. I mean a lot of help from really, really gifted individuals. He had already acted and directed in the theater, and he was a very well-connected individual in the entertainment business. In fact, legendary filmmaker Samuel Fuller helped rewrite almost the entire script and wanted no credit or pay for it. He came up with the idea of having Karloff face off with the sniper in the end of the film. The director also got notes from Howard Hawks and Alfred Hitchcock, whom he had previously known through his writing and interviewing days. His wife at the time, Polly Platt, helped with the story and a slew of other uncredited roles on the film. But this isn't your typical wife just trying to help out her husband when she can, This was a woman who had a career in which she produced these films and was a production designer for these films. She was the real deal. Bogdanovich also had acclaimed cinematographer Laszlo Kovacs behind the camera. They ended up working regularly together, and Kovacs had a sensational career. Needless to say, filmmaking is a collaborative effort. and Roger Corman was able to get the best out of his director, and supposedly paid him $6,000 for 2 pictures. Targets and adding additional footage to Voyage to the Planet of Prehistoric Women. Unfortunately, Targets came out during a time that was riddled with assassinations. JFK in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, and then both Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in April and June of 1968. The film was released in the United States in August of that same year. And even though the film was well received by critics, audiences simply weren't ready for this type of film. It also posed a huge problem that Boris Karloff was the star. It's a completely different type of horror movie you would go to see for Boris Karloff versus this type of real-life horror. Roger Corman, of course, went on to make a ton of other films and, of course, never lost a dime, as he's always told us. And Peter Bogdanovich, well, his future was kind of insane. He'd go on and get divorced from Polly Platt, only to have a romance with Playboy's 1980 Playmate of the Year, Dorothy Stratton, which led to her husband murdering her, and then Bogdanovich took time away from filmmaking and wrote a book about the murder, and then married Dorothy Stratton's younger sister. Needless to say, Peter Bogdanovich had creating powerful films such as The Last Picture Show, which earned 8 Oscar nominations, What's Up Doc, Paper Moon, and Masks. But honestly, let's just leave all of that for another video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And please, if you haven't seen Targets yet, I highly recommend it. Check it out.